The year is 73 BCE, and beneath the scorching Italian sun, a Thracian warrior named Spartacus stands chained in the Ludus, the gladiatorial training school of Lentulus Batiatus in Capua, his muscled body bearing the scars of countless battles, his eyes burning with a rage that will soon set the Roman world ablaze. But to understand how this man became the most feared rebel in Roman history, we must first descend into the blood-soaked underworld of the gladiatorial games, where men were transformed into living weapons, where death was entertainment, and where the roar of the crowd could elevate a slave to godlike status or condemn him to an agonizing end in the sand. The gladiatorial games were not merely sport. They were Rome's beating heart, a savage spectacle that revealed the empire's deepest truths about power, masculinity, sacrifice, and the thin line between civilization and barbarism. Close your eyes and imagine the Colosseum on a sweltering summer day in 80 CE. The year Emperor Titus inaugurated this architectural marvel with 100 days of games that would claim the lives of thousands. 50,000 spectators packed the limestone tiers, their voices creating a thunderous wave of sound that crashes against the oval walls. The wealthy patricians sit in the lower sections, draped in fine togas dyed with expensive Tyrian purple, fanning themselves with peacock feathers, while slaves serve them wine chilled with snow brought down from the Alps. Above them, the middle classes, the plebeians who form the backbone of Rome's economy, crane their necks for a better view, passing around leather skins of cheap wine, betting furiously on their favorite fighters. At the very top, beneath the blazing sun with no awning to shield them, sit the poor, the foreigners, the women, and the slaves, standing room only, but their voices just as loud, their bloodlust just as keen. The arena floor, covered in fresh golden sand imported from Egypt to better absorb the blood that will soon flow freely, stretches before them like a stage set for humanity's darkest theater. Beneath this sand lies an engineering marvel, the hypogeum, a vast network of tunnels and chambers where gladiators wait in darkness, where exotic animals pace in wooden cages, where elaborate stage machinery stands ready to lift fighters and beasts alike up through trapdoors into the killing zone above. In one of these shadowy chambers, a Murmillo gladiator named Marcus Attilius checks his equipment with practiced hands. He is one of the rare free men who has chosen this profession, driven by debt, by the promise of glory, by the intoxicating allure of fame in a society that offered few paths to distinction for common men. His helmet, a heavy bronze creation with a broad brim and a face-covering visor pierced with small holes for vision, sits beside him. His right arm is wrapped in leather and linen padding, the manica, which will protect his sword arm from slashing blows. His left leg is encased in a tall greave, a shin guard of polished bronze that gleams even in the dim light. His scutum, the large rectangular shield of the Roman legionary style, leans against the wall, its surface painted with his personal emblem, a roaring lion. His gladius, the short sword that gave gladiators their name, hangs in its scabbard at his side, its blade honed to a razor edge by the Lanista's weaponsmith just hours before. Marcus knows that despite popular myths, the mortality rate in the arena is not as high as one might imagine. Perhaps 1 in 10 bouts ends in death, for gladiators are expensive investments, their training costly, their entertainment value too precious to waste. Marcus has fought 12 times and won 11. His single loss came against a Thracian fighter who disarmed him but spared his life when the crowd, impressed by Marcus's courage, turned their thumbs in the gesture of mercy. The Lanista, the owner and trainer of the gladiatorial school, is a former champion himself, a scarred veteran named Aeneas who lost his left eye to a Samnite's sword 20 years ago but survived to buy his freedom with his winnings. Aeneas runs his ludus with an iron fist and a shrewd business mind. He knows which fighters will draw crowds, which matchups will generate the most betting action, which emperors and wealthy sponsors will pay premium prices for his best men. His school houses 60 gladiators of various types, the Murmillo like Marcus with their fish-crested helmets and heavy armor, the Thracian fighters with their small round shields and curved swords, the Retiarius, the net and trident fighters who rely on speed and agility rather than armor, the Secutor, purpose-built to hunt the Retiarius with their smooth, egg-shaped helmets and heavy shields, and the Hoplomachus, modeled after Greek warriors with their small shields and long spears. These men come from every corner of the empire and beyond. Prisoners of war from Germanic tribes, captured pirates from the Mediterranean, criminals condemned to the arena, and volunteers like Marcus who signed contracts trading their freedom for a chance at wealth and fame. The training is brutal, designed to strip away every instinct for self-preservation and replace it with combat reflexes honed to lethal perfection. The gladiators rise before dawn and train until dusk, practicing strikes against wooden posts called paulus, drilling footwork patterns in the sand, sparring with wooden weapons under Aeneas's watchful eye. Their diet is carefully controlled, heavy on barley and beans to build bulk and create a layer of fat that protects vital organs, supplemented with dried fruit and ash drinks rich in calcium to strengthen their bones. They sleep in cells that are locked each night, for gladiators are valuable property and flight risks. But for those who survive and thrive, the rewards can be extraordinary. The greatest gladiators become celebrities whose names are scratched as graffiti on walls across the empire, whose images appear on oil lamps and pottery, who receive gifts and love letters from aristocratic women, who accumulate enough prize money to eventually buy their freedom. Spartacus himself was such a man, captured after serving as an auxiliary in the Roman army, sold into slavery, and sent to the Ludus in Capua where his military training and natural leadership would make him a standout fighter. But Spartacus saw the gladiatorial life for what it truly was. Slavery dressed up as glory, men dying to entertain their oppressors, human beings reduced to property. In the spring of 73 BCE, Spartacus convinced 78 fellow gladiators to rebel, and they did so with the weapons they knew best, breaking into the school's kitchen, seizing cleavers and spits, overwhelming the guards and fighting their way to freedom. They fled to Mount Vesuvius and fortified their position while their numbers swelled with runaway slaves from surrounding farms. Rome sent a praetor with 3,000 men to crush this uprising, but Spartacus was no ordinary slave. He was a trained warrior with tactical genius. When the Romans blockaded the only path down the mountain, Spartacus had his men weave ropes from wild vines, descend the steep cliffs under cover of darkness, circle behind the Roman camp, and attack at dawn, routing the enemy in a stunning upset. Over the next 2 years, Spartacus's slave army would grow to 70,000 strong, defeat multiple Roman legions, and ravage southern Italy. The Senate, terrified, finally sent Marcus Licinius Crassus, the richest man in Rome, with 8 legions to end the threat. Crassus understood that defeating Spartacus required psychological warfare. When one of his legions fled before the slave army, Crassus revived the ancient punishment of decimation, dividing the 500 cowards into groups of 10 and forcing each group to beat one randomly selected member to death with clubs. The final confrontation came in 71 BCE in Lucania, where Crassus had built a wall across the toe of Italy to trap the slave army. Spartacus attempted to break through to Sicily but was betrayed by pirates who took his gold and never delivered the promised vessels. Trapped and desperate, Spartacus turned to face the Roman legions in open battle. Before the fight, Spartacus killed his own horse, declaring that if he won, he would have many horses to choose from, and if he lost, he would have no need for one. He fought his way toward Crassus himself, trying to reach the Roman commander, cutting down 2 centurions before finally being surrounded and cut down by a dozen blades. His body was never identified among the thousands of dead, and Crassus, denied the satisfaction of displaying Spartacus's corpse, instead crucified 6,000 captured rebels along the Appian Way from Capua to Rome, their bodies left as a warning. Yet the gladiatorial games did not end with Spartacus. They grew more elaborate, more expensive, more central to Roman life. Emperors used the games to win popular support, to demonstrate their wealth and power, to distract the masses with bread and circuses. Julius Caesar, during his rise to power, sponsored games featuring 320 pairs of gladiators, helping build his popularity. Emperor Trajan, celebrating his victory over the Dacians in 107 CE, held games lasting 123 days involving 10,000 gladiators and 11,000 animals, a spectacle requiring the importation of exotic beasts from every corner of the known world. Lions from Africa, bears from Germania, tigers from India, elephants from North Africa, crocodiles from Egypt. The morning of a game day at the Colosseum began with animal hunts, the Venations, demonstrations of Roman dominion over nature itself. Specialized hunters called venators faced these creatures with spears and bows, their skills honed through years of practice. Some hunts were staged as elaborate theatrical productions with painted backdrops depicting forests or deserts. The crowd delighted in watching a bear fight a bull, a lion attack criminals, a rhino charge a hunter. These spectacles also served as execution methods for those condemned to die, the damnatio ad bestias. Criminals, Christians after Rome began persecuting this religion, prisoners of war, and enemies of the state were tied to stakes and torn apart by starving animals while the crowd cheered. At midday came executions of common criminals, the noxii, stripped naked and butchered by armed executioners or mauled by animals, their deaths considered so unremarkable that many spectators used this time to eat lunch or socialize. Then, in the afternoon, came the main event, the gladiatorial combats, announced by trumpets that silenced the crowd. The gladiators entered through the western gate, marching around the arena, their armor polished, their weapons held high. They stopped before the emperor's box and delivered the salutation. Ave Imperator, Morturiti salutant. Hail Emperor, those who are about to die salute you. The matchups were carefully designed to create dramatic contrasts. A heavily armored Murmillo might face an agile Retiarius, strength against speed. A Thracian with his curved sword might battle a Hoplomachus with his spear, each man's weapons giving advantages at different ranges. When the signal was given, combat began, and here reality diverged from Hollywood spectacles. Gladiatorial combat was not chaotic but a calculated contest between trained professionals. Each fighter probed for openings, tested reactions, conserved energy for the decisive moment. A Murmillo might use his large shield to press forward, trying to get close enough to use his short sword, while the Retiarius danced backward, flicking his net in feints, looking for the moment to cast it and entangle his enemy. The crowd played an active role, their reactions influencing the fighter's psychology and noted by the editor who would decide a defeated fighter's fate. Blood flowed freely. Cuts to arms, legs, and torso were common. When a gladiator was defeated, disarmed, or wounded beyond defense, he could appeal for mercy, dropping his weapon and raising a finger in submission. The crowd would express their opinion, though the famous thumbs up or down probably did not exist as commonly believed. Ancient sources suggest a closed fist indicated mercy, while an extended thumb indicated death. The editor made the final decision but ignored the crowd at his peril. If mercy was granted, the defeated gladiator left through the gate of life, his wounds tended by skilled doctors. If death was decreed, the victor delivered the killing blow, a sword thrust to the throat or heart, while attendants dressed as Charon and Mercury symbolically guided the soul to the underworld. The corpse was dragged through the gate of death to the spoliarium where armor was stripped and burial arranged. The victor claimed his prize money and a palm frond symbolizing victory. Exceptional performances earned substantial wealth, and a gladiator who survived enough fights could be awarded the rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing freedom and retirement. Between fights, gladiators lived in contradictory worlds. They were slaves with shameful legal status, barred from citizenship, yet also celebrities whose fights were recorded in detail, whose images were sold as decorations. Women of all classes were said to be attracted to gladiators, and graffiti from Pompeii includes love letters calling them the sigh of girls. The physician Galen worked as a doctor for gladiators, writing medical treatises based on treating their injuries, calling them his window into the body. The Colosseum itself was a marvel of engineering, constructed between 70 and 80 CE, holding 50,000 spectators yet emptying in under 15 minutes through 80 numbered entrances. Its elliptical shape rose 180 feet high in 4 stories. The arena floor measured 287 feet by 180 feet, beneath which lay the hypogeum with tunnels, animal pens, and lifts. The structure could be covered with a massive retractable awning operated by sailors using naval expertise. The Colosseum was a statement of power, a gift from the Flavian emperors to the Roman people, built on the site of Nero's hated palace. Every major city had an amphitheater for hosting games, demonstrated wealth, and competed for political advancement. The cost was staggering. A single day of quality games could cost more than a year's salary for a Roman soldier. Yet the political rewards could be worth it, for successful games could launch careers, win elections, secure loyalty. As the Roman Empire reached its height in the 2nd century CE, the games reached their peak of elaboration. The Emperor Commodus was obsessed with gladiatorial combat, fighting in the arena himself hundreds of times, always winning because opponents were ordered to lose. Commodus saw himself as Hercules reborn, wore lion skins, carried a club, and believed his victories proved his divine status. He renamed Rome after himself and renamed the months after his titles. His delusional megalomania and enormous expenses helped destabilize the empire. On December 31st, 192 CE, his inner circle poisoned him, and when he vomited the poison, they sent his wrestling partner to strangle him in his bath. The decline of the gladiatorial games was gradual, driven by changing economics, shifting values, and Christianity's rise. The games were expensive when the empire faced military pressure and needed defense funds. Capturing exotic animals became difficult as frontier regions fell and animal populations depleted. The Christian Church condemned the games as immoral human sacrifice. In 325 CE, Constantine banned gladiatorial games in the Eastern Empire, though this was widely ignored. In 404 CE, a Christian monk named Telemachus jumped into the arena during a bout and tried to separate the fighters. The crowd stoned him to death, but his martyrdom shocked the community and Emperor Honorius finally banned gladiatorial games altogether. The last recorded gladiatorial games occurred in 435 CE. Yet the gladiators are not forgotten. The gladiator barracks at Pompeii, preserved by Vesuvius's eruption in 79 CE, provide an archaeological snapshot. Small cells with graffiti, storage rooms for weapons, the bones of 18 people. The gladiator cemetery at Ephesus contains 67 individuals whose bones show characteristic injuries. Healed fractures, blade cuts, puncture wounds, evidence of repeated trauma survived through excellent medical care. These were real people with names and families and hopes, who lived in the shadow of death for others' entertainment. Gladiators represent one of history's great paradoxes. Men who were simultaneously slaves and celebrities, morally degraded yet admired, property yet icons of courage, victims yet sometimes willing participants. Their story reveals uncomfortable truths about human nature, about our capacity for violence and fascination with death, about how societies create systems that dehumanize some for others' entertainment. The gladiatorial games were not an aberration but a logical expression of Roman values. A warrior culture glorifying martial prowess, a slave society treating humans as property, an empire built on conquest celebrating domination. When we judge the Romans for their bloodthirsty entertainment, we must ask what future generations will think of our own forms of violence and exploitation. The gladiators force us to confront these questions, and perhaps that is why their story continues to grip our imagination 2,000 years later. Why Spartacus remains a symbol of resistance, why the image of men fighting to the death while crowds cheer continues to haunt us as both spectacle and warning about the darkness lurking in the human heart. But there are deeper layers to this story, individual lives and specific moments that bring the broader picture into sharp focus, moments that reveal the complex humanity behind the blood and spectacle. Consider the story of Flamma, whose name means flame in Latin, a Syrian gladiator whose career spanned 22 years in the 2nd century CE. A career so extraordinary that his tombstone, discovered in Sicily and now housed in a museum, provides detailed statistics that allow us to reconstruct his life with unusual precision. Flamma fought 34 times, an astounding number that speaks to both his skill and his popularity, for unpopular or unskilled gladiators rarely survived so many bouts. Of those 34 fights, he won 21 outright victories, 9 draws where both fighters were judged equally matched and spared, and 4 defeats where he was granted missio, mercy from the crowd and editor. But here is what makes Flamma's story truly remarkable. He was offered the rudis, the wooden sword of freedom, for separate times, and 4 times he refused it, choosing to remain a gladiator, to continue fighting, to stay in the only life he knew, or perhaps the only life where he felt truly alive. What drives a man to refuse freedom, to voluntarily remain in a profession where death lurks in every bout, where even victory means standing in the blood-soaked sand while thousands scream for more? Was it the fame, the adulation of crowds who chanted his name, the gifts and love letters from admirers, the substantial prize money that made him wealthy beyond what any Syrian immigrant could normally achieve in the Roman Empire? Or was it something deeper, an addiction to the adrenaline rush of combat, the clarity of purpose found in the arena where life reduces to the simple equation of kill or be killed, the intoxicating power of holding another man's life in your hands while an emperor watches? Flamma's choice speaks to the seductive nature of the gladiatorial life for some men, the way it offered identity, purpose, and status in a world where most people lived and died in obscurity. His tombstone inscription, carved by grieving fellow gladiators or perhaps by admirers, reads like a military honor roll, listing his fight record with pride, celebrating a life spent in service to the most dangerous profession in the ancient world. Then there is the story of Carpophorus, a bestiarius, a beast hunter rather than a traditional gladiator, but no less remarkable for his specialization. Ancient sources, particularly the poet Martial writing during the reign of Emperor Titus, describe Carpophorus as a legendary hunter who could kill 20 wild animals in a single exhibition, who once fought a leopard, a lion, and a bear in succession without pause, dispatching all 3 with his hunting spear. Martial, given to hyperbole as poets often are, claimed that Carpophorus was more skilled than Hercules himself, that watching him hunt was like witnessing the mythical labors made flesh. Whether these accounts are entirely accurate or embellished for dramatic effect, they reveal the celebrity status that skilled performers could achieve, the way their exploits were celebrated in poetry and passed down through generations. Carpophorus represents another category of arena performer, men who specialized in facing animals rather than human opponents, who developed techniques and strategies for combating creatures that fought by instinct rather than training, whose deaths when they came were often more gruesome than those of traditional gladiators, torn apart by claws and fangs rather than dispatched cleanly with a sword. The venators and bestiarii occupied a strange space in the arena hierarchy, generally considered lower status than gladiators who fought other humans, yet still capable of achieving fame and wealth if their skills were exceptional. The training for beast hunters was completely different from gladiator training, requiring knowledge of animal behavior, understanding of how different species attacked and defended themselves, mastery of spears, bows, and sometimes specialized weapons like the venabulum, a heavy hunting spear with a crossbar to prevent a charging animal from pushing up the shaft to reach the hunter. These men worked with assistants who helped position animals, who used red cloaks and noise to direct beasts toward the hunter, who sometimes provided backup if a hunt went wrong. The mortality rate for beast hunters was significantly higher than for gladiators, for animals were unpredictable in ways that human opponents were not, and a single mistake, a slip in the blood-soaked sand or a moment's misjudgment of a charging lion's speed, could mean death in seconds. Yet men volunteered for this profession too, drawn by the same mix of desperation, ambition, and thrill-seeking that drew others to become gladiators. The infrastructure supporting these animal spectacles was itself extraordinary. A vast network spanning the empire and beyond. Specialized hunters, the Auceps, worked in Africa, Arabia, India, and the distant forests of Germania, capturing animals alive, a far more difficult task than simply killing them. Elephants had to be driven into pit traps and then carefully transported using massive wheeled cages pulled by teams of oxen. Lions and leopards were captured using baited traps and transported in smaller wooden cages reinforced with iron bars. Bears, particularly dangerous because of their strength and intelligence, required specially designed traps and multiple handlers. These animals then had to be transported across hundreds or thousands of miles to Rome, a logistical nightmare involving ships, wagons, and enormous expense. Many animals died in transit from stress, disease, or injury, making successful delivery all the more valuable. The poet Calpurnius Siculus describes seeing a rhinoceros in the arena, marveling at this creature from the far reaches of the empire, and we can imagine the crowd's reaction to seeing animals they had only heard about in travelers' tales, creatures from the edges of the known world brought to Rome as proof of the empire's reach and power. The Colosseum's animal holding facilities could accommodate hundreds of creatures simultaneously, with different species separated to prevent fighting, with veterinarians on staff to treat injuries and illnesses, with specialized handlers who understood each species' needs. The logistics of feeding these animals alone was staggering. Lions and leopards required fresh meat, herbivores needed hay and grain, elephants consumed hundreds of pounds of fodder daily. The smell in the hypogeum must have been overwhelming, a mixture of animal waste, rotting meat, blood, and the acrid scent of fear. The whole system was maintained by an army of slaves and low-paid workers who cleaned the cages, butchered meat for the carnivores, disposed of animal corpses, and risked their lives daily working in close proximity to creatures that could kill them in an instant. Some of these animals became famous in their own right, like the elephant that, according to Pliny the Elder, seemed to pray for mercy when wounded, kneeling and raising its trunk toward the crowd, an image so moving that the spectators demanded the creature be spared, and thereafter no elephants were killed in the Colosseum for decades. This story, whether entirely true or somewhat embellished, reveals something important about the Roman crowd. They were not simply bloodthirsty monsters delighting in suffering for its own sake, but rather a complex audience with evolving tastes and moral sensibilities, capable of mercy when moved, capable of outrage when spectacles crossed certain lines. The relationship between crowd, emperor, and performers was a delicate negotiation, a constant reading of mood and expectation. An emperor who ignored the crowd's wishes, who showed mercy when they wanted death or ordered death when they wanted mercy, risked losing their support, risked being seen as weak or tyrannical. The gladiatorial games were, in this sense, one of the few arenas where the common people of Rome could make their voices heard, could influence the decisions of the powerful, could exercise a kind of democratic power in an otherwise autocratic system. This is why emperors attended the games so faithfully, why they made such efforts to sponsor spectacular exhibitions, why they could not simply abandon this savage tradition even if personally disinclined toward it. Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, found the games tedious and distasteful, yet attended them regularly out of duty, though he famously brought documents to read while watching, a display of indifference that his advisors considered politically risky. The Emperor Tiberius simply refused to attend games, preferring to remain on his island retreat of Capri, and this absence contributed to his unpopularity with the common people who saw his refusal as arrogance and disconnection from Roman traditions. The games were not optional for emperors. They were an essential component of the social contract between ruler and ruled, one of the key mechanisms by which the emperor demonstrated his generosity, his connection to Roman values, and his willingness to provide for his people's entertainment. The scale of the games varied wildly depending on the occasion and the sponsor's wealth. Ordinary games held for religious festivals or commemorations might feature 10 or 20 pairs of gladiators, a few animal hunts, some executions, a day's entertainment that satisfied tradition without breaking the treasury. But extraordinary games, held to celebrate military victories, imperial ascensions, or major anniversaries, could be spectacular beyond modern imagination. Trajan's games celebrating the Dacian victory, which we mentioned earlier, involved 10,000 gladiators over 123 days, an average of about 80 gladiators per day, though the distribution was certainly uneven with larger spectacles on holidays and important dates. The Emperor Titus, inaugurating the Colosseum, held 100 days of games that ancient sources claim killed 5,000 animals and an unknown number of gladiators and condemned criminals. The Emperor Probus, in 281 CE, celebrated his triumph over Germanic tribes with games involving 1,000 ostriches, 1,000 stags, wild boars, deer, ibexes, wild sheep, and 100 lions, all killed in a single day. These numbers strain credibility, and historians debate whether ancient sources exaggerated, but even if we reduce them by half or more, we are still discussing slaughter on an industrial scale, an organized system of death as entertainment that required enormous resources and planning. The economic impact of the gladiatorial games on the Roman economy was substantial and multifaceted. On one hand, the games were a massive drain on resources, consuming funds that could have been used for military, infrastructure, or social welfare purposes. The cost of purchasing, training, and maintaining gladiators, of capturing and transporting animals, of building and maintaining amphitheaters, of providing free seats and sometimes free food to spectators, represented a significant percentage of imperial and local municipal budgets. Emperors and wealthy sponsors sometimes bankrupted themselves trying to outdo previous spectacles, engaging in a kind of arms race of extravagance that served their political ambitions but strained the economy. On the other hand, the games created employment for thousands, from the gladiators themselves to the trainers, doctors, weapon makers, armor smiths, animal handlers, arena workers, food vendors, and countless others whose livelihoods depended on this industry. The games also stimulated trade, creating demand for exotic animals from Africa and Asia, for metals for weapons and armor, for textiles for costumes and awnings, for lumber for arena construction and equipment. Cities with major amphitheaters became tourist destinations, drawing visitors from across the empire who spent money on lodging, food, and souvenirs, generating tax revenue for local governments. The gladiatorial games were thus embedded in the Roman economy in ways that made them difficult to eliminate even as their moral justification became increasingly questionable. The training of gladiators was a long and expensive process that helps explain why mortality rates in the arena were kept relatively low despite the violent nature of the contests. A new recruit to a ludus, whether a slave purchased specifically for this purpose, a prisoner of war, a convicted criminal, or a volunteer signing a contract, would begin with basic physical conditioning, building the strength, endurance, and flexibility required for combat. This could take months of running, lifting weights, practicing with wooden weapons against the paulus, that man-shaped wooden post that generations of gladiators had struck until it was scarred and splintered. Only after demonstrating basic fitness would the recruit be assigned to a specific gladiatorial type based on his physical attributes, fighting style, and personality. Tall, strong men with broad shoulders might become myrmidons, wearing heavy armor and wielding the short sword and large shield. Quick, agile men might become retiarii, learning to use the net and trident, relying on speed and distance. Men with good balance and coordination might become Thracians or hoplomachii, learning to fight with medium-sized shields and specialized weapons. Each type had its own instructor, a former gladiator of that type who had survived to retirement and now passed on his knowledge to the next generation. These instructors were highly valued, for a good instructor could mean the difference between a ludus that produced champions and one that produced corpses. The instruction was detailed and specific, covering not just how to strike and parry but how to read an opponent, how to manage energy during a fight, how to play to the crowd, how to make combat look dramatic and exciting even when taking minimal risks. Gladiators were taught to fight in ways that maximize spectacle, to strike in flourishes, to circle and feint and create moments of dramatic tension that kept the crowd engaged. A fight that ended too quickly, even if one combatant clearly dominated, disappointed spectators who had paid or been promised a good show. The best gladiators understood that they were performers as well as fighters, that their job was not simply to win but to entertain, and those who mastered this dual role earned the most money and the longest careers. The psychological preparation was perhaps as important as the physical. Gladiators had to overcome the natural human fear of death, had to develop the mental toughness to step into the arena again and again knowing that this could be the day they died, had to cultivate the ability to kill another human being without hesitation or remorse. Some gladiators developed a fatalistic philosophy, embracing the belief that death was inevitable for all men and that dying in the arena with courage was a noble fate. Others cultivated rage and hatred toward their opponents, channeling anger into combat effectiveness. Still others treated it as simply a job, a dangerous profession to be approached with professional detachment. The lanisti, the ludus owners, employed various psychological techniques to prepare their men, from pep talks before fights to harsh punishments for cowardice to rewards for exceptional performance. Some schools employed philosophers to instruct gladiators in stoic principles of accepting fate, of focusing only on what was within their control, of meeting death with dignity. The connection between Stoic philosophy and gladiatorial combat was not accidental. Both emphasized self-control, courage in the face of adversity, and acceptance of mortality. Seneca, despite his disgust with the spectacle of the games, admitted that watching a gladiator face death with composure could teach valuable lessons about confronting one's own mortality with courage. The ludus was a world unto itself, a closed community where gladiators lived, trained, ate, and slept together, forming bonds that were simultaneously brotherhood and rivalry. They knew that any of them might be matched against any other in the arena, that the man training beside them today might be ordered to kill them tomorrow. Yet they also depended on each other for training, support, and companionship in a life isolated from normal society. Gladiators ate together in a common dining hall, their meals prepared by ludus cooks according to the prescribed diet. They bathed together in the ludus baths, spending hours in the hot water relaxing muscles strained by training, engaging in the same kind of male bonding that soldiers experience. They gambled together, played dice and board games, shared stories and rumors, formed friendships and enmities. Some ludii allowed gladiators conjugal visits from wives or prostitutes, recognizing that denying all sexual outlet could lead to unrest and diminished performance. Others prohibited such contact, believing it made gladiators soft and distracted. The rules varied from school to school, but all ludii maintained strict discipline, for gladiators were slaves or the legal equivalent, their owners possessing total power over them, including the power of life and death. Escape attempts were punished savagely, usually with death, for an escaped gladiator represented not only lost property but also potential danger, a trained killer loose in society. The few successful escapes, like Spartacus's mass breakout, were remembered precisely because they were so rare and so dramatic. Most gladiators who survived long enough to retire did so by accumulating enough victories and prize money to purchase their freedom, receiving the rudis in a ceremony that must have been one of the most emotionally powerful moments of their lives, the end of slavery and the beginning of a new existence. But what did that new existence look like? Some retired gladiators remained connected to the arena world, becoming trainers at ludii, passing on their hard-won knowledge to the next generation. Others hired themselves out as bodyguards to wealthy Romans. For who better to protect you than a man trained to kill? Still others used their savings to start businesses, buying shops or workshops or farms, trying to build normal lives after years of extraordinary danger. But the transition was not always easy. Many retired gladiators struggled with what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, haunted by the men they had killed, unable to sleep without nightmares, turning to alcohol or gambling to numb their psychological wounds. Roman society also made reintegration difficult, for gladiators carried the stigma of their former profession, the label of infamous that marked them as morally degraded, regardless of their fame or wealth. Former gladiators could not hold public office, could not testify in court in most cases, could not marry into respectable families without causing scandal. They lived in a social limbo, too famous and wealthy to be ignored, but too tainted to be fully accepted. Some gladiators embraced this outsider status, living flamboyantly, spending their money on luxury, surrounding themselves with similar outcasts and enjoying what they could of life after surviving so much death. The famous gladiators whose names have come down to us through history represent only the tiniest fraction of the thousands of men who fought in arenas across the Roman Empire during the roughly 700 years that the games existed. For every Spartacus or Flamma whose story was preserved, there were hundreds who fought a few times and died anonymously, their names recorded only in the account books of their owners, if at all. The gladiator cemetery at Ephesus gives us a glimpse of these anonymous fighters, young men in their 20s and 30s, their bones showing the characteristic injuries of their profession, but no names or stories to tell us who they were, what they dreamed of, whether they chose this path or were forced into it. Each of those 67 skeletons represents a unique human life, a man who woke up countless mornings wondering if this would be his last day, who felt fear and pain and hope, who perhaps had family somewhere who mourned him or perhaps was utterly alone in the world. Their anonymity reminds us that history is written by and about the powerful, the successful, the extraordinary, while the ordinary masses who make up most of humanity leave little trace beyond their bones. Yet those bones tell their own story, a story of violence and survival, of a society that created a system where human beings killed each other for entertainment, where the lucky ones died quickly and the unlucky ones suffered for years before their inevitable end. The archaeological evidence from Pompeii provides another window into the gladiatorial world, for when Vesuvius erupted on August 24, 79 CE, it buried the city's gladiator barracks along with everything else, preserving a snapshot of that moment. When excavators uncovered the barracks in the 18th and 19th centuries, they found the expected items: weapons, armor, graffiti depicting fights and fighters. But they also found human remains, 18 people who had taken shelter in the barracks as the volcano erupted, seeking safety in the strong stone building. Among these remains was a woman wearing expensive jewelry, gold bracelets, and emerald earrings, her presence in the gladiator quarters sparking intense speculation. Was she a female gladiator, a rare but documented phenomenon? Was she the wife or lover of one of the gladiators, visiting when disaster struck? Was she a wealthy woman who had come to the barracks for some illicit purpose, perhaps seeking the thrill of being with these dangerous men? We will never know her story, but her presence reminds us that the gladiator world was not isolated from broader Roman society but rather deeply intertwined with it, that the arena and the ludus were places where different social classes mixed in ways that ordinary Roman life usually prevented. Female gladiators, the gladiatrices, remain one of the most controversial aspects of gladiatorial history, with scholars debating how common they were and whether they were serious fighters or primarily erotic spectacle. Ancient sources mention women fighting in the arena on several occasions, though always as a novelty rather than a regular occurrence. The historian Tacitus records that during the reign of Nero, women of high rank participated in gladiatorial combat, though he presents this as evidence of moral decay rather than female empowerment. The Emperor Domitian, whose reign lasted from 81 to 96 CE, was particularly fond of staging female fights, including nocturnal combats by torchlight that added an eerie atmosphere to the spectacle. A marble relief found at Halicarnassus depicts two female gladiators named Amazon and Achillea, both shown armed and armored like male fighters, suggesting that at least some women did fight seriously rather than simply serving as titillating entertainment. The inscription indicates both women were granted honorable discharge, suggesting they survived their bouts and earned their freedom through combat success. However, female gladiators were banned by the Emperor Septimius Severus in 200 CE, officially ending this practice, though whether the ban was consistently enforced is uncertain. The existence of female gladiators, however limited, challenges simplistic narratives about Roman gender roles and reminds us that ancient societies were often more complex and contradictory than we assume. The question of why some women would voluntarily become gladiators faces the same answers and mysteries as for men. Poverty, debt, the search for fame, the thrill of danger, the lack of other options for achieving distinction. Roman society offered even fewer paths to prominence for women than for men, so for a woman willing to risk everything, the arena might have represented a perverse kind of opportunity, a chance to escape the ordinary constraints of female existence even at the cost of moral reputation and physical danger. The end of the gladiatorial games in the early 5th century CE marked not just the end of a particular form of entertainment but the end of an entire worldview, a classical conception of spectacle, power, and the relationship between rulers and ruled. The rise of Christianity fundamentally challenged the assumptions underlying the games, replacing a culture that glorified martial prowess and accepted violence as entertainment with one that emphasized mercy, compassion, and the sanctity of all human life. This was not a smooth or immediate transition. Christians attended the games for centuries even as church leaders condemned them, demonstrating the powerful hold these spectacles had on Roman culture. The story of Telemachus, the monk who jumped into the arena in 404 CE and was stoned to death by the crowd, is presented in Christian sources as the catalyst that finally ended the games, his martyrdom shocking people into recognizing the moral horror of what they had normalized. But the truth is more complex. The games were already dying by that point, strangled by economic pressures, by the loss of territorial control that made capturing exotic animals difficult, by the empire's shrinking population and wealth, by the rise of alternative entertainments including chariot racing, which was equally thrilling but less morally problematic since it primarily killed horses rather than humans. The gladiatorial games did not end because Romans suddenly became enlightened about human rights or developed modern sensibilities about violence. They ended because the conditions that sustained them collapsed, because the Roman world that had created and supported them was itself dying, fragmenting into successor kingdoms that would eventually become medieval Europe. Yet the memory of the gladiators never died, passed down through literature and art, through the ruins of amphitheaters that still stand across the former empire, through the stories that fathers told sons about the glorious and terrible days of Rome's power. Renaissance rediscovered classical texts describing the games and was simultaneously horrified and fascinated, unable to reconcile admiration for Roman civilization with disgust at Roman cruelty. The Enlightenment used the gladiatorial games as evidence that even advanced societies could be barbaric, that civilization was fragile and needed constant moral vigilance to prevent sliding into savagery. The 19th century romanticized the gladiators, imagining them as noble heroes fighting for freedom, with paintings and novels depicting them in heroic poses, particularly Spartacus, whose revolt was reinterpreted as an early struggle for human liberty against oppression. The 20th century brought movies that cemented popular images of gladiatorial combat, from the 1960 film Spartacus starring Kirk Douglas to the 2000 film Gladiator starring Russell Crowe, both of which took substantial liberties with historical accuracy but captured something essential about why these stories still resonate. The drama of men forced to fight for their lives, the moral complexity of finding honor in a dishonorable system, the timeless appeal of underdogs rising against powerful oppressors. These modern retellings often say more about contemporary anxieties and values than about ancient reality, projecting our concerns about individual freedom, about the dehumanizing effects of systems and institutions, about the corruption of power onto historical situations that the ancients themselves understood very differently. But this is how history works, each generation finding in the past reflections of present preoccupations, using historical study not just to understand what happened but to understand ourselves. The gladiators have become symbolic figures, standing for different things to different people. Victims of oppression, heroes of resistance, warriors embracing their fate, professionals plying a dangerous trade, or simply violent men in a violent age. The truth is they were all of these things and more, complex human beings trapped in a system not of their making, navigating impossible choices with whatever courage or cowardice they could muster. When we study the gladiators, when we visit the Colosseum and walk where they walked, when we examine their bones and their graffiti and the accounts of ancient writers, we are studying ourselves, examining what humans are capable of, both terrible and admirable, considering how societies create and justify systems of exploitation and violence, asking how much agency individuals have within oppressive structures and whether resistance is possible or even meaningful. The gladiators offer no easy answers to these questions, but they force us to ask them, and in that asking, we honor their memory more truly than any romanticized retelling ever could.